Before we continue exploring our example, and we reach this point here where we are going inside the block of the main function, we briefly discussed the basics of functions and the main function in our previous tutorial. But before we start exploring this line here, let's put into practice some of the concepts that we've discussed so far. So let's create inside this example a function that when we call this function, it will going to print playing back a WAV file, and it's always also going to print the time and the date. So for that we need to import a crate that will help us to display the time. We need to create a function, and inside this function we need to put something that will print what we want, and then when we call this function, for example here, then it will execute and then it will print before it plays back our WAV file. So first we can create a function here, and we use the keyword function, and let's call this function print something. This function will take no arguments, so we're starting with a very basic example. Then we need some curly brackets, and then we can start putting something inside this function. If we remember our Hello World program, we already used something to print, and we use this macro print ln. Then there's this exclamation mark, and this exclamation mark tells us that this is not a function, but this is a macro. But we need to save the discussion about macros for later. For now, let's just try to create a function using this print ln, and then let's print playing a WAV file. So we have our function that's called print something. Inside this function block we have this macro, and we want to write in the console, in the terminal, playing a WAV file. So if we call this function here somewhere, the last function will play and sleep until end. So then it would, if we put our function after this, it will first play and then print. We can also try it out. So when we run our program, so it first played, then wrote in the terminal playing a WAV file, but we want to play it before, to print it before it plays. So we can place it here. So we are calling this function print something, and this print something we will execute this function that has no arguments, is not returning anything, but it's printing in the terminal using a macro displaying a WAV file. So let's run once again. Okay, so first part of our task for today is done. We created a function to print playing a WAV file, but now let's also print the time just for the sake of it. So I'm not going into the details of the print macro. We will discuss this maybe in our next tutorial or maybe somewhere later. And I'm also not going to discuss this the details of how we're going to print the time, but let's just use it for now. There is a crate that is called crate chrono. Chrono aims to provide all functionality needed to do correct operations on dates and times. So it's a date and time for Rust. So to use this chrono, we can put here use chrono, but there is a problem. We even see that the color here in VS Code is different, because we need to tell Rust that we're going to not only use it, but before it can use, we need to include in our toml file. So the cargo toml file. And if we read here in the crates.io, we have chrono time zone aware date and time handling. We can install by running cargo add chrono, or we can add this following line to your cargo toml. And that's what we're going to do. So I'm copying this, I am putting here. So now I am saving. So it's doing a cargo check, fetching, indexing, and now it changed the color here. So we are ready to use chrono. I could simply add another line here with some print and then call something inside this create chrono that would give us the time, or I could, just for the sake of it, create a function that I will call print date and time. It would not take any arguments, and then I will put a line of code here. So it's the same, print ln. So this something for now will be something inside the curly brackets. So I have a double colon and a question mark. We will have to discuss this later. For now, let's just use it and test it. And then I need to call something from chrono. And then inside chrono there is something called offset. Then inside offset there is something that is local. And in local there is the now. And then I have here my function to print date and time. So as I said before, I could put this line here, or I can create another function for it. This is what I did, and we will do like this in our main function. First I will print something, which is our playing back wave file, and after it plays it will print date and time. So let's run this example and see what happens. It's compiling, building. So it first print playing a wave file, and then here we have our date and time. Or I can move this and put somewhere else. I can put in the beginning of my main function, so we can run again. So first it displayed the date and time, then it printed playing a wave file, and then it played the wave file. So in this tutorial we created very basic functions that they don't return anything, they don't take any parameters or any arguments, they just print something when we call them. We also used another crate, in this case the chrono crate. So to use this chrono crate, what we did is we used this keyword used, like we also use for the buff reader from the standard IO, but we needed to include the chrono in our toml file, and that's what we did here. We include chrono here. So that's it for today. We will have to come back to functions again, because there are much more to explore in functions. We will talk more about these macros and the print, and then we will start looking at this line here.